if you've been watching just the news over the last 2 or 3 years, you would be hard to ignore that there is one of the greatest parental rights movements, and I really think children's rights movements in America, restoring the right of parents to have a say over their children's education, and taking it away from bureaucrats who think that it's their job to teach morals and values and politics to children, when really what they should be teaching are just the educational skills that children need to be successful in life. And so the battle royale is underway. If you go back and say, how did this all get started? And there's different flashpoints. Certainly COVID was a big part, but this really started about a decade ago. And my next guest, she was at the flashpoint when this all started. She's the founder and CEO of Optima Ed. She's a guest faculty member at the Leadership Institute School Board programs, where school boards are being taken back by parents. What a novel idea that is. She's also the wife of one of my best known favorite friends in Congress, Byron Donalds, joining us right now. Erika Donalds. Erika, great to have you on the show.
John, thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Your work is extraordinary, and I think it's fair. We were talking about this off air. You were in this before it was cool to be in this, but the groundwork, the spade work, a decade of parents digging in and saying, hey, what's going on in the education system? Not right. It really started about a decade ago, right? We're probably in about the 10th or 11th year of this work.
You know, you got me thinking, what got me involved as a parent, we have 3 boys, 2 are still school age, 1 is in college, unbelievable. But what got me awake, and a lot of parents awake, is Common Core. Back in 2008, 2010, where they changed the map and parents were just going, what are they doing? It's coming from the federal government. The state should be making these decisions. It did start the movement of parents knocking down the doors going, who's making decisions on behalf of my children, and shouldn't I be more involved? And as you mentioned, I was elected to school board here in Southwest Florida in 2014, and that's where my eyes were opened. As a mom, as a CPA at the time, I looked around and thought, man, this system is broken. It is not responsive to parents. Parents don't really know what's going on in the decisions that are being made for their children. And from there, it really has ignited a movement where parents are doing what we should have done, and frankly, what our parents should have done a long time ago, which is take back our schools and really give the parents' rights movement the fuel that it needs, so that we're not leaving it to unions and the government to tell us what to do with our kids.
Yeah, it really is pretty extraordinary. I think I first noticed something amiss or unusual or feeling different. I think I was at the time I was the editor of the Washington Times, and we saw this speech. It was one of the American Teachers Union officials, executives, testifying before the United Nations, and they laid out this agenda. And I remember watching it and saying, "Hey, I got to get a reporter on this. What's going on here?" And these teacher unions were telling the UN that America was going to become the model for a new education system where parents who didn't know better could have their children taught by teachers who knew better. And it was such an extraordinary speech. I remember getting a couple of reporters on it. We wrote about it. There were some op-eds, and it just played out for there. And I think the teachers unions and the bureaucrats and the leftist NGOs, they won the first decade. And then along came COVID, and parents had their kids at home, and they're like, "You're teaching my child what?" And all of a sudden, I think the second wave of the movement began. Is that chronology sort of match up with what you were watching at the time?
Well, absolutely. COVID definitely pulled back the curtain for a lot of parents, and especially suburban moms. I remember starting our first charter school here in Collier County back in 2012, and my neighbors were upset with me because me starting a charter school to move my children meant that the school that their kids were in wasn't good enough for me, and they were offended by that, because they take pride in their A schools in their suburban neighborhoods. And those same moms are the ones who were, as you said, seeing what was being taught in the classrooms, many also dissatisfied with the low level of expectations and rigor, as well as seeing teachers on vacation who are saying that they will die if they have to go back to school in person. And meanwhile, the parents' lives are upended having their children at home for an extended period of time. So I think the COVID crisis, both in education and across the country, the economy and everything, that really brought moms out of their comfort zones because they trusted teachers, they trusted the schools. They thought all they needed to do was move into a good neighborhood with, quote, great schools, and their job was done. But they know now that unions are not out for kids, they're out for adults, and that the standards in our schools were so low, even in the schools that were considered good schools.
Yeah, it's just remarkable. We're passing through students who really don't have the skills that their diploma would suggest they have, and it's such a capitulation to failure. It's really destining this country to some difficult futures if we don't reverse it quickly. I started my career in the 1980s in Wisconsin, where there was a governor named Tommy Thompson, and he started school choice, and it was a pretty novel idea back then. Very controversial back then, but he partnered with a black Democrat lawmaker from Milwaukee, Polly Williams, I think was her name, and they started this in Milwaukee, and then Michigan jumped in, and there was some early successes to school choice, and then it kind of fell out of favor. Common Core came in, and over the last 4 or 5 years, school choice has really bubbled back to the top of really important conversations and successes, whether Arizona with its universal school choice plan. This is National School Choice Week. You've been at the forefront of really developing, I think, wave 2, or maybe it's wave 3 of school choice experimentation and success. Tell us what's going on and why it's so important to disrupting the path of failure that's been going on in public schools.
Well, when I was on the school board for 4 years, that's all I could take. I didn't run again. I looked at all of the problems in the public school system, and I boiled it down to one major issue, and that is the monopoly, right? Monopolies do not work in any area of our economy. They certainly do not work when it comes to something as important as the service of education to our children. And unfortunately, that monopoly has had a stronghold for decades and really actually a century. So my solution coming out of that experience on the inside was that competition is the only thing that is going to reform education in this country. And that has actually been proven out in my home state of Florida over the last 25 years, where we've had school choice. We've had charter schools, magnet schools, virtual school available here in Florida. Not enough people are able to take advantage of those because of the differences in funding and things like that. But those who do, we see our charter school sector outperforming districts in 81 out of 96 measurements, including reading performance, math performance, closing the achievement gap. Students who are in our private school choice programs, 42% more likely to attend college, 20% more likely to achieve a bachelor's degree than their public school counterparts. But the most important school choice outcome is happy children, happy parents, children who love to learn, whose parents have found a school, an academic experience that works for their child to thrive, no matter what their outcomes in the future, being productive citizens, being active in our democratic republic. These are outcomes that are even more important. And I think school choice and really education freedom, with all of the new ways of accessing that through ESAs and the like, which I hope we'll talk about, brings out innovation and access to people who need it. And that is what's going to allow an education system to thrive here in America.
Yeah, it really is. And it really is wave 2. I think the universal school choice, the idea of portability of the tax dollars, and the idea that schools have to compete to get the students, which, makes the schools more responsive to trying to help these students, all are the driving forces of this. What are the most important experiments or early programs of what I would call school choice 2.0 or maybe even 3.0? Where are the best experiments right now? Clearly in your home state of Florida, a lot of success. Where else?
Arizona has a universal education savings account ESA program where over 50,000 students are currently taking advantage of these private accounts, government funded. Parents can use those accounts to pay private school tuition. They can homeschool, purchase curriculum. They can hire tutors, get therapies for their children, other instructional materials. They can actually customize the education experience for their child in some incredible ways. So I think Arizona is definitely out front on this. Oklahoma passed a tax credit for education, which I think is wonderful because we are seeing so much red tape and bureaucracy. No matter how hard these states try to give education freedom, they have to wrap it in red tape for both providers and parents. I love Oklahoma's experiment with the tax credit, refundable for parents to be able to spend their money, keep their money, and spend it on a great education for their kids. We're always talking about or directed to look at parents who may not make the right education choices. Well, look at our education system. It's not like they're doing a bang-up job. I absolutely trust parents far more because the vast majority of parents care more about their kids than anyone else, and they want them to have a great education. If given the tools and the funds, they will do so.
Yeah, we had Ryan Walters, the state superintendent of public instruction at Oklahoma, on the show a couple times, and he's really digging into a lot of these big experiments. Obviously, once you get going, there is this countervailing force called the teachers' unions. Talk a little bit about just how far the teachers' unions have gotten into politics and how politics sometimes seems to override even their educational interest. Right now, I think the unions are trying to rescind their endorsement of Joe Biden because he's standing by Israel. These unions have become such political mechanisms. It seems like children in education are like low down on the priority list.
Absolutely. I would encourage any one of your listeners who wants to have a good laugh, go look at one of the agendas for a conference of one of the teachers' unions. There is virtually nothing on their agenda that isn't political, culture wars. It's not about teaching children to read and do mathematics, despite the tragic results that we've had compared to other nations, that we're trying to compete globally on an academic level. And these teachers' unions who represent the vast majority of teachers across our country are distracted with all kinds of nonsense. They're worried about political campaigns. To your point, they're worried about Joe Biden standing with Israel. Who cares? You're supposed to be teaching our kids how to read and write and do mathematics, and you're not doing that well. I am a huge proponent of things like paycheck protection, which Florida passed last year. I don't think the teachers' unions belong in our public schools any longer. Their time has come and gone. I have so many stories from being a public school board member about why unions are not good for students and the outcomes that we need.
Yeah, it's just remarkable. I keep a close eye on your Twitter account because I think you are such a fount of information about the data that's coming up. Because listen, this isn't just an ideological battle. Conservatives think one way, liberals think the other. There is overwhelming data coming from academic institutions about what's going on. And one of the places where I think there was just a new study in the last few weeks, maybe in the last day or two, was on the impact of SEL. And a lot of people don't know what SEL is, but it is pretty amazing. Social, emotional, or political issue learning is basically what it turns out to be. Tell us a little bit about, I think you're familiar with this study, what it found and how students who came out of SEL training or instruction, what happened to them personally.
Yeah, let's start with what is SEL. This has been around for quite a while, and it also went under the radar for a lot of families before COVID. But this is social emotional learning where teachers were expected to be like therapists, teaching students how to manage their emotions and how to deal with difficult situations at home. And again, once again, a distraction from what they are supposed to be doing in class. But this study that just recently came out said that students, after completing an SEL program, were more depressed, more anxious, had more difficulty managing their emotions, and had worse relationships with their parents. So this is a failed experiment. I know one of the private schools my children went to had a huge SEL program. Once the parents read the things that were in these materials that were being used on the children, they revolted. They were so upset that they were talking about these sensitive issues with their children without parents even knowing about it, suicidal thoughts and things like that, that they got rid of that program in that school. And I think it's more about, parents need to know what is being taught to their children. And this study is great because it shows us it's not even working. Stop trying to be therapists and stay in your lane. Teach what you're supposed to teach.
Yep. It would be help if just the basics of learning were the focus of our teachers and our teachers union. And then, by the way, there's lots of great teachers, but the unions often are at the forefront of hijacking those teachers' intentions or even their opportunities. It's remarkable to watch. Tell us a little bit about what you've created with Optima Academy Online. It's a pretty darn interesting initiative you've got going.
It is, and it actually came out of the need for a distance learning program in COVID. We wanted to create the highest caliber program that we could with our classical liberal arts curriculum in order to deliver that to our students who were not able to come in person. So Optima Academy Online is the world's first virtual reality school. We have our own classical liberal arts curriculum that we're delivering in virtual reality when you're taking live courses. The other materials are online as well through Canvas. And our students are going to school 4 days a week. They're interacting with highly trained, classically trained teachers and really rigorous material. So we're very excited. This is our second school year, and we are tuition free in the state of Florida, in Arizona, using their ESA that we talked about earlier, and many other states approved in Oklahoma for their tax credit program. Everywhere that we can access public funds to give parents an excellent school choice option, Optima Academy Online is there and available.
Yeah, so important. We have mentioned ESAs, but I would like to dig in a little bit, because I think when you take school choice, particularly universal school choice and ESAs, there's a continuum that maybe the earlier school choice movement of the 80s and 90s didn't have. ESAs are a very important part within the tax code and within the learning environment for parents to make sure they have a place to park money and use it in a way that benefits their children. What is the arc of ESAs? How are they catching on? Are more and more parents using them? How important are they to making this continuum of school choice completely successful?
Well, I mentioned in Arizona, over 50,000 families using ESAs. In Florida, the universal program was passed just last year, not even quite a year ago, and over 500,000 applications for ESAs have come in Florida. And we're seeing more and more states pass this. Arkansas is one of them in litigation. I think there are 13 states that have some sort of ESA program. The biggest issue we have, though, is parents don't know that they're available. I have a mission. Every time I'm in an Uber, I tell the Uber driver about this free scholarship.
Ubers are the new town hall, isn't it? It's sort of funny.
Yeah. Well, they talk to so many people. I want to make sure that they know, right? And many of them don't know that their child could go to school for free to a private school, and they're so excited to hear about it. So when they do hear about it, though, then there's the red tape I mentioned earlier, and that's why we need governments to stop thinking they know better than parents. Give parents the funding and give them the freedom to make decisions, and then let the free market work. Innovation cannot come about with the stifling red tape of government. And so if we really want to see the free market work in education, the innovation that we can't even imagine today, we've got to let go and let parents decide. Let them be consumers for their own children and act in their own interests. And let's get the government out of the way. That's the only way to reform the system. What we're doing is not working. We got to get rid of the monopoly and open up the free market to innovation and access for all.
Yeah, our founding fathers, every time they saw a problem in the country, they realized that competition in the open market would create the best solution. Not a big government creating it, not a big union, but just old-fashioned competition. And you have opened, along with so many other really important players, you've opened up an entire era of new competition in education that really is so impressive. One last question for you. Obviously, your husband's in Congress. There's a big election occurring in 2024. And there's a lot of parents saying, I got to get the kids to soccer practice. I'm homeschooling. I got to do all these things. What is the best advice for a parent who really wants to make a difference in this next 10 months? What can they do to make a difference with, limited time and limited resources and maybe even limited training to get engaged in the political system and make a difference?
Well, this is where the Leadership Institute is there for these parents. I was trained by the Leadership Institute more than 10 years ago before I ever worked on a campaign or got involved in politics. I had no idea what I was doing, but they showed me how to be an effective activist. How do I even get involved in a campaign? How do I go to my local school board and be effective in telling them what I think about the policies that they're passing? So the Leadership Institute has all types of programs, whether you're just wanting to understand the process, whether you want to get involved as an activist, or maybe you want to run for school board or run for office eventually. So the Leadership Institute is an incredible organization. They do so much good for helping people to get involved and really understand the process and how they can make a difference in their communities or even nationally.
Yeah, such important. It's fun. Just a little bit of training can go a long way when you first step into a new arena like a school board or an interaction with a teacher or the school system. There's nothing like having a few minutes of good training and good advice before you go into that, because the other side has unlimited resources. And so it's really beneficial to, if you're going to dive in, to get that training. Such important work. Erika, what's the best way for folks to follow your great work? You're prolific on Twitter, and I check you often because you find so many things that other people don't know about. But what are the best ways for folks to engage you and all the good work you're doing, as well as the incredible academy that you've put together with Optima Academy Online?
Yes, definitely find me on social media. As you said, I am the most active on Twitter, but at Erika Donalds, Erika with a K. And I would love to connect with anyone. I love interacting with people who are like-minded or who have questions or even want to debate. Optima Academy Online can be found at optimaacademy.online. So optimaacademy.online is the website. That's where you can find courses. If you're not in a state where you need curriculum or courses, we also have VR field trips that are educational. So if your student does have a VR headset, they can actually do educational things that they will enjoy very much in that headset. So optimaacademy.online.
For us old folks, VR is virtual reality, and it's become so real life. It's really an amazing experience. I had no idea how real life VR has become.
Well, they get to go to ancient Rome, go to the moon, and learn about the lunar landing. Independence Hall, we have an amazing constitutional experience. So we're using it for good to spread the truth, good, and beauty of a classical education.
How about that? Pretty awesome stuff. Erika, what a great honor to have you on. We're watching all the great work you're doing. This really is, I think, a watershed year for education. The momentum is building for school choice. School boards are being taken back, community by community, and ESAs are starting to spread around the country. Disruption, but competitive disruption that I think is going to be for the good of our children. And it's great to have you on, helping us understand that incredible dynamic.
Well, thanks for all the great work you do, and I appreciate you having me on.
We'll be sure to get you back on real soon, because this year is going to be pretty consequential, particularly in education. So great to have you on. Thanks for the time today.
Thank you.